Okay, so hello and welcome to our Itentive Healthcare Solutions webinar. We're excited to share our NextGen add-on solution, ChartGuard, with you today. My name is Chelsea Grover and I'm the Marketing Communications Coordinator for Itentive. I'd like to take a moment to explain the process for today's presentation. First, I'd like to mention that this webinar will be recorded. Next, for those of you who aren't familiar with Itentive, I wanted to share a bit of who we are with you. We've been in business as Itentive since 2003, but we've been NextGen users since 1997 EPM version 2.3. We specialize specifically in NextGen Healthcare. Our development team knows how to get data into, out of, and around NextGen to customize it and tailor-meet our clients' unique needs. Our purpose in life, the reason we exist, is to create delighted clients by helping them get the absolute most out of their NextGen software investment. It is our passion to provide solutions for our healthcare provider partners, which in turn help them to improve patient care, enhance the patient experience, and maintain a financially healthy practice. We really do everything NextGen, from consulting to hosting, customization to support, and we have two NextGen add-on productivity solutions, ChartGuard, which is what we'll be discussing, ChartGuard and RefundManager, which is the one that we're discussing today. Next, I wanted to mention some upcoming webinars that we'll be offering. The first one is going to be on June 15th, where we're going to be presenting on a few new NextGen enhancement products that we've created, including a patient portal auto-enrollment, unapplied utility and balance control scripting, and iCare server health. Then on June 22nd, we're going to offer a complimentary educational webinar on HIPAA-compliant texting, the do's and don'ts. So keep your eye out for an invitation to those, or you can register for them directly on our website through the Events and Education page. Okay, so back to Refund Manager. At the end of the presentation, we're going to open the floor up to questions from you. We'll answer all the questions at the end, but you may type them in the questions area of the webinar control panel whenever they occur to you. Finally, for audio clarity purposes, everyone's phone will remain muted throughout the entire webinar. If you experience audio issues, please use the chat box to let us know so we can resolve them. And again, questions may be entered in the questions box. So without further delay, I'd like to introduce our presenters for today. Tom Seco is Itentive's Business Development Manager. He's been part of the Itentive family for over 2.5 years, working with our NextGen add-on products, RefundManager and ChartGuard. Before that, he was involved in business management consulting, helping small to mid-sized market businesses improve their standings. Tom also has a vast knowledge in information technology. This unique mix of experience gives Tom a unique insight into the day-to-day challenges our clients face. Joel Schultz is the Director of Product Solutions at Itentive. Joe and his team are the people that actually built RefundManager. Joe has been a key player since way back with the formation of Itentive in 2003. He has been working in healthcare since 1995 and has been working with NextGen since 1997. His passion for the industry is clear in every project he works on. So Tom, I'm going to go ahead and pass the webinar off to you. Feel free to get started when you're ready.
Okay, thank you very much, Chelsea. Appreciate going through all the housekeeping aspects of the presentation today. So as Chelsea mentioned, we're going to talk about Refund Manager today, streamlining and automating the refund process within your practice. So here's the agenda. What we'll do is we'll talk about what Refund Manager is. We'll talk about why practices buy Refund Manager, how Refund Manager works. We'll go through the versions of Refund Manager, and then I'm going to turn it over to Joe, and Joe's going to go through a demonstration of the Refund Manager product itself so you can see how it works in a live situation. And then come back to me and I'll give you an overview of Itentive and who we are, and then we'll answer your questions that are submitted through the chat box like Chelsea had mentioned. So with regards to Refund Manager, its purpose is to make your job easier, and we do that by streamlining and automating the refund process. We enable the people on the billing side to quickly find credits within a NextGen environment, and we integrate with your financial system in order to eliminate data entry. The accounting systems that we can integrate with are either through a direct connection with accounting systems such as QuickBooks, Great Plains, Peachtree, and ACPAC, and then other systems that other accounting systems we can integrate with using CSV files and XML files. The overall goal of Refund Manager is to increase productivity, and when we went back and talked with some of our clients, they came back and told us that we've been able to reallocate resources to other areas of the billing and accounts receivable area, and that we're spending less time sending money out of the organization and spending more time bringing money into the organization. As I mentioned, when we went back and talked to our clients about RefundManager and what they thought of it, this is some snippets of the comments that came back from them. I won't read them all, but I will point your attention to the first bullet, which says reduce from days down to hours now. And what that indicates is that there is a productivity improvement. And then if you look at the fourth bullet, it says pays for itself in time savings alone. That shows that there's a return on the investment. There are risks associated with carrying credit balances. There are Medicare penalties, insurance contracts have clauses, state laws with regards to unclaimed property, misstated profits. Some people think that there's a source of revenue if they don't claim or don't refund the credits. With regards to Medicare, Medicare can suspend payments if we do not get back credit balances back to them in a timely fashion. Third-party contracts usually have clauses in them with regards to not getting credits back to them in a timely manner as well. State laws, as I mentioned, and the state laws vary from state to state with regards to carrying credit balances and what you should do with them. Some states, if the credit balance goes unclaimed for a period of 3 years, such as in the state of Oregon, it has to be reported back to the state as unclaimed property. California has a law that says after 60 days, if the overpayment's not turned back to the individual, that the organization needs to start paying interest to that individual. So it varies from state to state. Take a look at your state laws and see what they say with regards to carrying credit balances. There can be some class action litigation that goes on with carrying credit balances if you have so many of them. As I mentioned, misstated profits. Some organizations think that the credit balances, if they go and claim, that the organization can take it back as basically as a revenue stream or profit. And just as we mentioned with regards to Medicare and insurance and state laws, that's not the case. We have, over the years, talked to many prospects and clients with regards to credit balances in their system, and we've seen organizations that have 1,000, 2,000, 5,000, 10,000 instances of credit balances in their system. And when you're getting into those types of numbers, it can lead to some potential of unethical activities. So managing those credit balances is a proper thing to do within your organization. The next couple slides I'm going to go through is going to talk about the refund process, the credit balance handling process within an organization. In this particular slide, what we're showing here is that the credit process touches a couple different areas within your organization. The billing area, the accounting area, and then a data entry function. Within the billing area, when an organization processes credits, you're either going to do that on a proactive manner or a reactive manner. Reactive manner is somebody calls up on the phone and says, I have a credit on my account, I'd like to have a refund issued to me. On a proactive manner, you have a report of the credit balances and you're going through that report on a regular basis, typically every couple weeks or one time a month or once a quarter. You're going through and processing the credits, but you're doing it in a proactive manner. In either case, you're going to go through a series of steps for that particular credit to determine what you should do with that credit. When you encounter that credit, you're going to look at the encounter details. You're going to look at the transaction details. You're going to look at the account details, and you're going to decide what to do with that credit. You're going to decide whether to issue a refund for that credit, or you're going to decide maybe I should move that credit to an account that has open balance on it. So in either case, you're going to go through basically those 4 steps. So if you look at the numbers and how it can quickly accumulate into what you're doing with the credit balance. If you have 250 credits and you're going through 4 steps for each of those credits, you're going through 1,000 steps to process those 250 just on the accounting side. Once you identify what to do with, once you identify the credits that are refunds, somehow you're going to get those refunds over to, those credits over to the accounting department to be issued as refunds. And that gets over to the accounting group in many different ways in organizations. Sometimes it's a piece of paper, sometimes it's an email, sometimes it's a spreadsheet, sometimes it's just word of mouth that we have a credit on this account, please issue a refund. But once it gets to accounting, accounting is going to go through and enter into the accounting system the name of the person or the insurance company getting the refund, what that refund amount is, the address of where that refund check is going to be submitted. So you're going through a series of steps of entering that information into the accounting system. So again, in this case, you can see that there's 3 repetitive steps that you're doing. You're entering the information in, and then you're printing the checks. So if you're doing 150 refunds, you're going through 450 steps in that accounting process. And then once you get done with entering or printing all the refund checks, some organizations enter that check information back into NextGen, so you're going through a manual process of data entry there as well. Other organizations don't enter in that process, so you have different ways of doing it. But it's a very manual process, task-intensive process when you're going through the current approach without RefundManager. With RefundManager, as this slide shows, that we streamline and automate the process, taking out many of those steps that we had just talked about. On the billing side, in the way that we present the information to the individual looking at the credits, it makes it much easier for them to make a decision on what to do with that credit, whether it is to issue a refund, whether it is to move that credit over to an account that has an open balance, or whether it's to task that credit out for further research because you don't want to spend a lot of time on it right now, but you need to task it out to maybe another individual to do further research on it. In getting the credits that are identified as refunds over to the accounting group through the automation piece that I talked about earlier with regards to the interfacing to the accounting system, whether it's a direct interface or a CSV file, we eliminate much of the data entry that goes on with bringing that information into your accounting system. So eliminating the data entry portion allows for less errors to occur when entering in the check information into your accounting system. And then the printing of the refund checks becomes basically automatic because the accountant just needs to make sure that check paper is into printer and the checks are being printed out properly. And then the data entry piece that I talked about with regards to bringing the check information as far as check number, check date, check amount, bringing that information back into the NextGen patient chart happens in an automatic fashion as well, where we eliminate that portion of data entry. So that information gets updated in the patient chart. And you'll see this process in the demonstration that Joe goes through. RefundManager is made up of 3 modules, the Credit Scout module, the Batch Detective module, and the Importer module. And in the demonstration, you'll see Joe will go through each of these modules, and you'll see how each one of the modules works. With the Credit Scout module, that's the one that's going to be used by the billing people to identify where the credit balances lie within the patient accounts and then decide what to do with that credit balance. It's the module that converts the credit balances into refund transactions. It also gives you the ability to redistribute that credit balance to an account that has an open balance on it. And as I mentioned it earlier, it gives the ability to task that credit balance out for further research by tasking it out to the work log manager. The Batch Detective module is the module that brings the refund check information over into the accounting system. So that's the module that's going to be used by the accounting folks to bring that information into the system and be able to then print the checks. And then the importer module is the module that's going to bring the check information as far as check number, check date, check amount, bring that back over into NextGen and update the patient chart with that information. So the benefits of RefundManager is it reduces the time and labor for issuing refunds. You're able to apply the credit balances to other encounters in the practice in a quick fashion. As I mentioned, you can task it out for further review. We integrate with your accounting system to eliminate data entry and reduce the amount of time that occurs with getting the information into the accounting system. RefundManager is basically self-documenting as it goes through the process. It leaves notes, creates notes at each step of the way, so you can see what's being done as the credit moves through the process. And then importing the check numbers over back into NextGen allows the staff to be able to take a look at the patient record and see, when the refund check was issued and who it was issued to and where the refund check was sent. RefundManager 3 is our latest release of RefundManager that we released earlier this year, and it has many new features in it. What we have done is made RefundManager multi-practice aware. So what does that mean? That means that organizations that have multiple practices set up in NextGen can now see a guarantor account across all the practices. So in the event, so for example, if we have a physician office and a surgery center and they're set up in NextGen as separate practices, you would be able to see Tom Seco's account both in the physician office and in the surgery center and take a look at where that credit lies, and then be able to move credits between the practices as well. So if some organizations take deposits as the patient comes in and they don't really have any place to put that deposit at this point in time, so they'll just apply it to a particular practice. Well, then later on they realize that deposit should have been moved over to the other practice. So with this latest release of RefundManager, you can now move that deposit that you took, and it's sitting there as a credit now. Move it over to the other practice as an encounter is created, now has that open balance. You can pick the credits to refund from multiple practices on a single screen, because on the screen that shows where the credits lie, you will now be able to see all the credits within the various practices and decide which ones you want to refund. You can select and create next spend batches across the practices as well. We've added the ability to implement within RefundManager workflow and financial controls by creating a requester role and a refund processor role. So now you can have a person assigned as a refund requester, and then you can have another individual assigned as the refund processor. So the same person cannot request and refund a credit. And then in QuickBooks, we created the ability to handle a single company file that has multiple checking accounts. And this is useful if you have physicians that maybe have separate checking accounts. So now you have the ability to use RefundManager with QuickBooks in that type of environment. So now I'm going to turn it over to Joe, and Joe's going to go through a demonstration of RefundManager for you. So you'll see the process, how it works, and you'll see the three modules as far as the Credit Scout, the Batch Detective, and the Importer module.
All right, great. Thank you very much, Tom, and thank you for those of you attending today. We appreciate your time. We're moving over to our demonstration machine, so your screen may have changed a little bit. If you're having trouble seeing it, you may need to work the scroll bars, just because the resolution here is a little bit different than the machine we're doing the slides on. We embarked on the path of creating RefundManager 11 years ago this month, and we ran into practices such as yourselves who had a number of credit balances out in their system that they needed to get resolution on, and if they created refunds from those credit balances, they needed to get them out into their accounting system. What's happened over the past 11 years is RefundManager has evolved greatly from the input of all our clients that continue to use it on a day-to-day basis. As Tom just mentioned, we recently rolled out RefundManager 3, which has a lot of new enterprise multi-practice features in it, but it still has the same great features in it if you're a single practice and want to get credit balances processed quickly. One of our goals at the beginning of RefundManager was to have it be integrated with NextGen. So when you sign into EPM, we register RefundManager into the add-on menu, and there's security so that only certain people can see the add-on menu and only certain people can get into RefundManager because, of course, you don't want everyone giving away the money in the practice. When it launches, it gets its context from NextGen. So it knows if you're an NG prod or NG demo, it knows where the database is, it knows what user ID you're logged in as. So all the work RefundManager is going to do for you happens on your behalf using your login information. So if you're in NextGen, it looks just like you did it manually, okay, except you're getting the streamlining and automation benefits from RefundManager. Tom talked about in one of the final slides 3 of the modules in RefundManager, and that's what we're going to go through in summary today. And we can always go into a more depth demonstration with your specific practice if you want to reach out to us via email or phone and schedule that. But what I want to do today is just take a little bit of time to show you and give you a flavor for how RefundManager works and how it saves you a lot of time in handling your credit balances. So we're going to start out in the Credit Scout, which is the NextGen facing piece of RefundManager that looks up your credits, and then you can decide, do I want to task these out to handle later? Do we want to research them? Do we want to distribute them to other encounters where money is owed, or do we want to refund those credits? So we'll spend the majority of our time in there working through some credits, showing you some of the benefits. And then after we've created some refunds, we'll go into NextGen, post the batch, and then we'll export it out to the accounting system. Again, as Tom mentioned, there's a number of accounting systems we support, and we're continuing to add more every year. What we're using here in our demonstration environment will be QuickBooks. A number of them work similar to how we work with QuickBooks with a direct interface, and then there are a number of them that have file-based interfaces where we export out a certain format file and then the accounting system knows how to read it in. So we'll export those out to the accounting system, and then we'll close the loop by bringing back the check information from the accounting system using the import tool and updating your transactions in NextGen with that check information. So you have that full loop of the refund being processed. You know the check was cut, the date, and so on. So let's jump into the Credit Scout and find some credit balances here in NextGen. Okay, there's a number of search criteria along the top that have been added over the years based on certain needs of certain practices, such as the ability to search by names for specific ones, the ability to search by date range to shorten up the search, or maybe to organize how they're working old credit balances, maybe in chunks of time of 3 months or 6 months. The ability to do smart filtering based on if we're looking for the easiest refunds or the most complicated refunds, or are we specifically looking for distributions where we want to take a credit and move it over to other encounters where money's owed. Some practices only use RefundManager for patient refunds, and they do adjudication for the insurance refunds. Some use it for both. We allow you to search on that. As Tom mentioned, RefundManager is now multi-practice aware. So again, it still works great if you're in a single practice, but if you have several practices and your user ID in NextGen can access those practices, those will be the same ones you're allowed access to in RefundManager. We have certain groups where they want to search by location. Maybe the refunds are being worked at each location and they only want to base it on the credits that are in their location. It'll still look at the overall account, but at least that way they can determine if there are credits that they're concerned about. Rendering providers part of the search, what department the charges are in. Financial class, if you're working insurance refunds, maybe you're just trying to clean up for Blue Cross Blue Shield. You have a number of credits out there and you're just trying to get them all straightened out, so that's part of the search criteria. And an interesting one that came up a number of years ago was practice came to us and said, hey, you know what, we realized we're sometimes mailing checks out for patients that are coming in the next day. And when they come in the next day, odds are they're going to owe us money again. So can we eliminate from the results patients coming in within some number of days, right? So we go out and look at the appointment schedule and we can drop those from the list if we set this to 7, that they're coming in the next 7 days. And there's integration with the NextGen tasking with the work log, so you can include or exclude based on what tasks are open. So all that search criteria on the top helps you determine what you're going to get for the results in the bottom. The screen is laid out and operates very similarly to the way you work in NextGen practice management already. Search criteria, find your results, take action on the results down below in the grid. Now, in this grid below, what we're seeing is an overall kind of guarantor summary. So there's 5 levels of results in RefundManager that I'll dive into in just a second. But let me scroll down to a few of our sample patients that we've set up here in our database and pick out several that are good examples of how RefundManager works. So I'm going to go down first to Marion Kelly. So I'll highlight this line so that we're all looking at it. And again, this is the summary of the guarantor. So we can see, the name of the guarantor, date of birth to confirm it, if there were any dependents that were on there. So we see that list of people in there. And, that's important if you're looking for someone specific and they don't happen to be the guarantor. Well, we move that up to the top. The number of accounts, which also is the number of practices they're in, the total patient credit balance across all the practices, payer credit balance, and so on. So over here on the right, we can see the practice, or in this case down here, the practices where credits were found. So, okay, great. This is the guarantor, but how does that really help me determine if I want to issue a refund? Well, first, let's dive into the 5 levels. So the top level is the guarantor. The next level is the account/practice. Okay, so if there were multiple practices, you'd have multiple at this level. The next level is the recipient of the refund. So that could be the guarantor or any of the insurances. And then underneath that, we have the encounters that make up the credit balance for that recipient. And you can even expand it down to see the individual charges. So if you just wanted to refund certain charges, you could go ahead and do that. So we give you a great deal of detail here and kind of a convenient hierarchical way to view it, especially if you're working across multiple encounters or even multiple practices. Additionally, you need greater detail to be able to make that refund decision. So we've incorporated in screens that mimic the financial summary and account summary screens from NextGen. So the financial summary generally will give you the overview by bucket, right? How much is in the patient bucket across the account, how much is in the primary insurance, secondary, tertiary, and so on. So it's very similar to what you're going to see on the financial summary in NextGen. The big difference here is that this one is multi-person and multi-practice aware. So if we had several people in here, we had some dependents, they'd show up at this level. If we had multiple practices, we'd be able to see it across practices based on the practices your user ID has permission to log into in your NextGen database. So in this case, we're just working with a single practice. So we see the details per encounter that we'd see if we went into this in NextGen. Now, if you're looking for more transactional information, we also have the account summary screen where, just like in NextGen, you can double-click and expand any of the lines to be able to get more detail about what's going on, the particular transaction, and then what it was applied to, and so on. And this one's useful for helping you determine if a credit balance is a real credit balance or just something out there from someone going crazy with adjustments. So the whole key here is to give you enough information in RefundManager to start recognizing patterns and making decisions on what you're going to do with your credit balances. This one here, it's a patient. The refund's going to the guarantor. There are 6 encounters. So if we want to do refunds for all these, all we have to do is click this middle checkbox here to tell RefundManager when we go ahead and say, yeah, let's process it, do this work for us. Go out to each encounter, create the refund transactions, enter in the information. If you think about the transaction screen, right, you have the header portion of the screen where you pick the transaction code and you enter the amount. You have the bottom portion where you apply it against the charges. Well, RefundManager is going to do that for you automatically on your behalf. And for NextGen, it's going to look like you did it yourself. So this is a fairly simple one where all the monies go into a single entity, in this case the guarantor. I have a more complicated one I want to show you here too, which is our other sample patient, Mildred Key. And as we look across, we'll see, yeah, there's a $44 patient credit, $233 payer credit. Let me move this one up to the top, and then we'll expand this one for just a moment. So we'll see at the next level is the practice/account. So this one's just in a single practice. But down further, we'll see there are 3 entities receiving the refund. There's the guarantor, there's Medicare, and there's United Healthcare. And we can continue to expand any one of these to see the encounters or even down to the charge if we want to do that. Okay, so if you want to, you can pick, hey, I just want to refund the guarantor today, and pick down at a lower level and get the guarantor. If you want to refund everyone, you can pick at the highest level, and then all the checkboxes get checked underneath. Okay, by the way, as we're looking at this one, you start to kind of look at the fields. Some of them might make sense, some of them might not make sense. Well, if you want one, you're just getting started with RefundManager, you can turn on headers for all these fields. So you can go, oh, okay, this one is the, the COB, this over here is the policy number, so on and so forth. But once you get used to the data in RefundManager, it's obviously a lot cleaner, and you can fit a lot more on the screen if you turn the headers off. So for those of you that have been doing NextGen for a long time, all this data probably made sense from the get-go. For those of you that are newer, the headers would be greatly helpful, but you can turn them off at any point. RefundManager has its own address book in addition to supporting NextGen addresses. And where this is important is a lot of times in refunds, especially with payers, the refund address is different than the default address in NextGen. So many years ago, we built in an address book into RefundManager, and that's accessible by clicking these buttons all the way on the right end of the line. So we can see here on Medicare, this one's already selected to go to a Medicare refunds address. If we click on that, we can see our list of addresses that RefundManager has stored and you've input into it over the years. If you choose not to use one of these, we'll go look for a refund address in NextGen. They started supporting that in version 5.7 and have enhanced it further in version 5.8. So we'll look for the refund addresses in NextGen, and if we don't find those, then we'll do the default address, just like we would normally. Okay, so that capability is in there for you in RefundManager also. So in this case, we have kind of a complicated scenario where refunds are going to several entities. And again, if you think about all the work you'd have to do, well, here we're just going to go ahead and tell RefundManager, yeah, when we process this one, take this credit and go do all the transactions to create the refunds for us in NextGen. So refunds are just a piece of what RefundManager does. We can also do distributions where you want to move money from one encounter to another encounter. So if you have a credit on an encounter and the patient owes money on other encounters, wouldn't it be nice just to move that over instead of refunding it and then sending them an invoice several days later for the other encounters where they owe you money? So we have a couple different scenarios that we've set up with our sample patients that I want to show you real quick. So the first one is more of a simple one where it's in a single practice. And if we look down, we can either use our distribution filter to find these, So I use kind of a filter that does a wider search so that I can show you the refunds and the distributions and so on. But kind of the clue to me in this case is that down on the encounter I have a $220 credit, but as I go up I only have $185.85 left. So there's about $34.15 that is owed somewhere on this account. So this is a case where we'd want to do a distribution. We'd want RefundManager to create the transactions in NextGen to move that amount from the credit over to where there's money owed. And if we want RefundManager to do this for us and we just wanted to do it from oldest to newest, we simply just click the D checkbox for distributions, and when we tell it to go ahead, it'll do all that work. If we want to see a preview of what it's going to do, we can right mouse and pick Distribution Preview. And in this case, on the left-hand side is where it's getting the money, and on the right-hand side is where the money is going to go to. Distributions can work within a practice, as we're seeing here with our sample patient, Catherine. It can also work across practices. For those of you who have multiple practices, or maybe it's a practice in a surgery center, we often see with surgery centers because the patient may not have been seen there yet, but they're at the practice and they want to give a deposit, so it gets tied to the practice, and later they want to move it over to the surgery center. So I have Dennis Kramer set up here, and if we look across the line for Dennis Kramer, we'll see that there's credits in multiple practices. We can go ahead and expand this down, see the various practices. We can expand each one of those. In fact, if we want, this is a case where we can show you the financial summary and the way it handles multiple practices. Let me kind of collapse these at each level. So you see that you get that view for those of you who have several practices, and as we saw before, it works equally great for a single practice. Now let's say we want to move money between practices. Again, we simply click the distribution checkbox. Now if we want to control the movement of the money, we can take an extra step, right mouse, and pick distribution matching, which lets you pick the credit transactions on the left, the debit transactions on the right, and how you want to move that money. So you just kind of pair them up. So let's say we're going to take the 13 and apply it against the 45, and then we see each balance got reduced. So let's take 33, apply it against the remaining 32, and down below it's keeping that list of from and to, where the money's coming from, where the money's going. Maybe here in the pediatrics practice, there was part of a deposit that's going to go against a surgery center balance. And we can keep doing this until either we decide we're done or we run out of money. So I'll just go ahead and finish out till we run out of money here on the credit side. RefundManager is going to do the work to create all these transactions for you. In the case of moving money across practices, it'll write it off in one practice and put it into the other practice as a new transaction. And you get to pick for the write-off whether it's going to be a payment transaction, an adjustment transaction, or a refund transaction for the write-off. And then for receiving the money, you can pick whether it's going to be a payment transaction or an adjustment transaction. We have different practices who operate different ways, so we built in that flexibility. So in this case, just by pointing and clicking, we told RefundManager how to build these transactions without us having to go into NextGen and enter in all the information on the transaction screen, right on that payment screen. Now, it may be possible that you have some encounters out there that just have a whole bunch of stuff going on them. And maybe you're in a groove with RefundManager picking the ones that you do want to take action on. So for the ones that are more problematic to decide what to do on, you can task those out into the NextGen work log, and that's done just by simply clicking the T checkbox. Okay, and that'll task it, and we'll pick the task type in just a moment. So really the streamlining process here is you get to decide what you want to do. You do that evaluation based on your knowledge of the practice, but you don't have to do all the hard work, all the heavy lifting of creating those transactions. You simply use the checkboxes and tell RefundManager to go ahead and do that work for you. Okay, so I'm going to pick a couple more just for refunds, just so we have a little more data to put through. So we have some refunds out there, some distributions out there, and some that are going to be tasked. When we've decided we're done picking what we want to do for today, we can tell RefundManager, okay, go ahead and process all these. It'll bring up our processing screen where it'll give a summary of what it's going to do. In the middle here, we can pick our parameters that we want to use. So we've done some refunds already, so it remembered our last refund codes used. We've done some distributions, so it remembered the code used to move it within the practice. Should probably be distribution intra-practice. When we're taking it out of the practice, we're going to do a refund transaction code. And when we're putting it in another practice, we're going to do a payment transaction code. So we haven't selected the task type yet, so we can go ahead and do that. So these are just your normal NextGen tasks, because remember, this is all integrated with NextGen. We can check our batches that any of our transactions are going to be tied to. Again, if you're single practice, you'll just see one line. If you're multi-practice, you'll see lines for each of the practices you have access to. You can also create batches from within the screen, or you can pick from existing ones. So now, to do all that work for us, we simply go ahead and click the Start button, and it's going to go out and do all those refunds. After it finishes the refunds, it's going to go out and do the tasks, put those encounters in the work log so someone knows to go ahead and work those and figure out what's going on with the adjustments. And then it's going to go ahead and do our distributions. So a lot of work was just done on your behalf in RefundManager. In fact, if we jump over into NextGen Practice Management, I can find our batch that we just populated, and we can go ahead and post it, and then we'll jump into a couple of these and show you. I'll show you a distribution first, and then I'll show you a refund transaction. Once we have those, we'll go ahead and export out those refunds into the accounting system, print the checks in the accounting system, and then close the loop and bring the check information back into NextGen without you having to do a lot of data entry. So we get our batch listing, same as you do today when you're doing it manually. In fact, this batch can contain manually done work and automatically done work. RefundManager will export out refund transactions, whether it creates them automatically on your behalf or whether you want to do them manually. There's sometimes where you want to force a refund, or sometimes you're already in there cleaning up the encounter. So, you're like, well, I'm already here. Let's just do the refund transaction. So we allow you to still do them manually in addition to using the automation to create one. So let's go ahead and look at one of the distributions first. So we'll look at the simpler one for our test patient, Catherine. And if I go to the account summary, because this one's going to be across encounters, here's the transaction we just created. The net is 0 because it's a positive and negative of the same amount. Within each encounter, we'll also create encounter notes, so you can go to one encounter and say, hey, where did this money come from, or where did this money go to? And I'll show you the encounter notes in just a moment on the refund transactions. So let's go ahead and look at a refund transaction, and then we'll follow that one through as we export it out to the accounting system. So we go to our transaction view. Here's our refund transaction that was just created. In the tracking description, we put the batch that it's part of. We also created an encounter note with a little more detail. We'll create another note when we go ahead and export it out. All right, so we have all that information that's now in NextGen that we need to get out to the accounting system so we can go ahead and print those refund checks. So we have QuickBooks for our accounting system. So we're kind of caught up with our checks here, so we want to get some more checks in there. So we're going to go back to RefundManager, and this could be the same day, it could be a week later. We don't mind either way. And we're going to go into the second module, the Batch Detective. The batch detective looks through NextGen for one or more refund transactions in a batch and shows you that list of results. Here's the one we just created. We're going to go ahead right mouse and export it out. Now, in many of the accounting systems, we support GL mapping, so we can take practice provider location and map that to certain GL codes over in the accounting system. For some of the file-based ones, we do have some GL mapping or at least basic GL coding in there for your import file. For QuickBooks, it doesn't do a really great job of consolidating refund checks, so we built a module into RefundManager to go ahead and do that. This can be used with other accounting systems, but most of the other ones will go ahead and do a single check per vendor if you wish. So here in QuickBooks, we set it up for patient consolidation, so it's just saying, hey, for Mary and Kelly, instead of sending 6 checks, one for each of those encounters, we're just going to send over a single check. Okay, so we can go ahead and click on the export button, and now it'll go ahead and put the information into the accounting system for us. Again, this may be a direct interface like we're using right now, and we can see the checks popping up here, or it might be a file-based interface where you send it over to accounting, they import it in and send you some kind of report back. So it's letting us know it's sent over 10 checks, which we did that consolidation, which is why it's fewer checks. So now in QuickBooks, we saw that information in here. In fact, in the check view, we can scroll through several of them. We can see the detail was sent over for that consolidated one. And now with our accounting hat on, we're happy because we didn't have to data enter all that information. So we can get in there, do a quick review, print our checks, much like we do today. I'm just going to print them to a file so we don't waste paper here. But the important thing is when we print the checks, they get assigned check numbers. Yes, these all printed okay. So now we have check numbers in here. They're in the accounting system, and we want to get those back in the NextGen. So many practices today do a lot of data entry. They get a report back from accounting. RefundManager practices go into the import module. They find the exports that they did. They pick it. They right mouse. They import. It goes out to the accounting system or reads in a file from the accounting system and updates NextGen. So let's go back to NextGen, and we'll go back to our transaction. Now I haven't refreshed this yet, so it still has the batch, but if I jump over and jump back, then we have that check information in there for you automatically. And as promised, we also have a note from when we exported. And the cool thing about the export note is it captures the address that was used when it set up the payment in the accounting system. Since it could be one of several possible addresses, this way you have it documented for you right there. So that's a quick run through of RefundManager. So streamlining and automating the refund process, Credit Scout to help you decide what to do with the credit balances, Batch Detective to help you get those credits out to the accounting system, and the import tool to bring in the check information. Tom, I'm going to turn it back over to you to cover the company slides and then the Q&A.
Okay, great. Thank you very much, Joe. So we're going to switch back and go through the remaining part of the presentation. I know we have a few minutes left, so I'll go through this a little quick for us, and then if you have any questions, we can take those questions. So we'll leave enough time to answer questions at the end. People generally ask us what it takes to implement RefundManager, and it's a pretty simple process. It takes about 60 to 90 minutes to install the software in your environment. What we do then is have a kickoff call to talk through the process, and during that kickoff call, we ask you to give you a link to our training videos. So we ask you to go through 4 of them. They're about 10 to 11 minutes in length each. We ask you to go through the user guide, and then what we do is set up a call with our Refund Manager specialist to answer any questions that you have with regards to the training videos and the user guide that you went through. Once that gets done, then what we'll do is set up another call to begin the process of training you in your test environment. So we'll begin to walk through the process of credits and refunds in your training environment. And then once that gets complete, you feel comfortable with that, then we'll go move it over to your production environment, and we'll also be on the phone with you there to make sure that you feel comfortable with the process as you go through the first couple batches there. There's a few versions of RefundManager that we have: a standard edition for smaller practices, professional edition for larger practices, and then an enterprise edition for practices that have multiple practices set up in NextGen, multiple databases, things like that. A little bit about Itentive. We were founded in 2003. Our mission is to create additional value for your NextGen investment. As we know that you spent a lot of money with NextGen, purchasing it, going through upgrades, probably had to buy additional hardware as well, so your investment's grown over the years, and we want to work with you to get as much value out of that as possible. We have 15 years of experience with NextGen. We have consultants that travel across the country working with individual practices to improve workflow, improve the performance of the system, and working with you to get as much out of your investment as possible. We have over 350 clients that we use NextGen as well. Because of all of our experience, we have quite a few solutions that are available to us or to you. A couple of our products, RefundManager we talked about today. ChartGuard is a product that's a business continuity solution that ensures that you have patient chart availability during times when you no longer have access to NextGen or the provider's staff no longer have access to the patient chart information because we download that information every night, so you have it available on a local PC. And I can talk more about that if you have interest in that. We can now take your questions. We have a few minutes left, so we can answer any questions that you have. If you want to go ahead and type them in, and we'll go ahead and answer them for you.
Hey guys, thanks so much for doing the demo and for walking us through it. Again, you can type in your questions in the questions area of the webinar control panel. So the first question we have, will these slides be available to print? Yeah, I'll be sending out an email later today with a link to the slides and the recording of this, though obviously much of it was a live demo, so those won't be in the slides, but if you are looking for some information that you missed from that, just let us know and we'd be happy to go over them with you. Next question. How much training is required? Excuse me, how much training is required? Joe, do you want to answer that?
Definitely. The training for RefundManager is real straightforward. As you saw in the demo, the workflow kind of lends itself to the process. We've gone to great lengths to really simplify what you need to do. So as part of the training, what we do is we provide you with about an hour's worth of training videos. There are 4 or 5 videos depending on your setup that you watch. And then after you've watched those, we'll set up a Q&A meeting where we'll kind of do what we did today in the demonstration, but we'll go into a little more depth, and depending on where you're at with your installation, we may even do it with your own data. So that way you can see it in your environment, and it's a chance for us to also make sure that everything's wired up and talking right between NextGen, RefundManager, and your accounting system.
Thanks, Joe. We have a Citrix environment. Can you run it still?
Yes, we have from the beginning supported both PC implementations and terminal server / Citrix implementations.
Okay. Next question. Do you have the option to post the refund after the check is issued?
In RefundManager, we want you to post the batch first so that the batch doesn't change after it's been sent over to accounting. So this ensures that what's in NextGen is locked in and mirrors what's on the accounting side. In the past, where we've seen clients not want to do that was because they wanted to update that tracking description field. However, RefundManager can do that on your behalf even if the batch is already posted. Obviously, if you have a unique circumstance, feel free to drop myself or Tom an email about that, and we can discuss that further with you.
Thanks, Joe. Next question. How often do you send out updates?
We normally do a single feature update each year. However, there are a number of minor updates that come out during the year as we take on new accounting systems that we support or add new features for those accounting systems. If there's a major update coming out, we'll normally blast out an email to everyone who's on our email list about that major update to let them know. Or if it's a critical update due to some change in NextGen, which, by the way, we keep it current with NextGen, we'll send out an email to let you know about that too.
Okay, next question. Do you have the option to flag accounts you don't want credits moved, i.e. surgery prepayments?
Yes, we have a couple ways of handling that. In the classic mode of RefundManager, which is what we worked in today, you can set up certain SIM codes to be ignored for credit balances. So if you're posting those payments onto kind of a dummy SIM like deposit, those can be ignored. And then in the workflow version of RefundManager, which Tom briefly touched on earlier, where you can designate some people as requesters who can actually generate the refund transactions and other people as processors who then take those requests and generate them. We also have a checkbox in there where you can mark certain encounters as non-refundable. So we have several different options, and again, during a demonstration, during your installation, we'd work with you on which one would be best for your situation.
Okay. Well, it looks like that's all the questions we have right now, but we're going to hang on the line in case anybody's in the middle of typing one. Tom, Joe, thank you so much for the presentation, and everybody who joined us today, thanks for taking the time out of your busy schedule to meet with us. Like I said, I'll be sending out a follow-up email, and you can feel free to ask any questions in reply to that or to the contact information that you see up on the screen. And don't forget to follow us on social media. We send out weekly tech tips and other assorted NextGen related information, so it's a great resource. Tom or Joe, anything to add?
No, as Joe and Chelsea mentioned, if anybody has any further questions about RefundManager, please contact us. And again, thank you for taking the time to attend our webinar.
Thank you very much. Have a great day, everyone.
Thanks, everyone. Have a great day.